What do you do when a war hero is denied the right to fly while escorting a fallen brother home? You raise your phone, you raise your voice, and you watch justice take flight. That morning, the sky above Phoenix Liberty International was as clear and blue as any other day. Inside the airport, the soundscape was a usual blend. Wheels rolling over tile floors, announcements echoing overhead, footsteps quick and urgent, conversations clipped by time. But amid the rush of passengers, one figure stood apart. Major Elijah Ward, 45 years old, uniform pressed to perfection, cap tilted just so, moved with a deliberate stride across the polished terminal floor. His chest bore rows of service medals, each a silent marker of a life lived in uniform. But the heaviest thing he carried wasn't the black leather duffel over his shoulder, nor the silver cross pinned neatly to his lapel. It was a flag-draped casket waiting silently on the tarmac. Private Marcus Bell, 21, a soldier, a comrade, a younger brother who would never make a home. Elijah stepped up to the Ether Sky Airline's check-in counter, presenting his military credentials, identification, and the official escort orders. Behind the counter stood Kelly Monroe, a check-in agent with a practiced smile and a polite nod. She took the documents, typed quickly on her keyboard, then paused. Her eyes lingered on the screen longer than usual before she looked back up, and when she did, something had shifted in her expression. "I'm sorry, sir. I just need to verify something," she said, her voice quieter now, fingers still clutching the paperwork as if unsure of what she was holding. Elijah tilted his head slightly. "Is there an issue with my documentation?" Kelly leaned over to whisper something to her colleague, then turned back. The polite smile tightened with restraint. "We have some internal security protocols. Due to certain restrictions, you won't be able to board this flight." Elijah furrowed his brow, his voice calm but unmistakably firm. "I am on an official military assignment. I am escorting the remains of a fallen soldier. All documentation has been verified by the Department of Defense. I must be on that flight." Kelly lowered her gaze. "I understand, sir, but this is company policy. I don't have the authority to override it." Behind them, the line of passengers began to stir. A man leaned in to whisper to his wife. A woman frowned at Elijah's uniform, then turned to her husband, confused. But Elijah didn't waver. His eyes stayed fixed on Kelly's hand, on the military orders that now lay on trial, judged by someone who had no idea what was truly at stake. "Elijah Ward," he said slowly, "served in Afghanistan, Iraq, 3 special tours. Not once have I been denied boarding under any circumstances. Until the day." Kelly hesitated. "I'm just following protocol." "What protocol?" Elijah asked, his voice sharp as steel. "Exactly what clause in Ether Sky's policy allows you to refuse a service member who is escorting a fallen comrade back to his family?" Kelly said nothing, and in that moment, the silence spread, cutting through the waiting area like a blade. Elijah didn't get angry, but something was rising in him, not fury, but something far heavier, the ache of betrayal, born right in the country he had sworn to protect. And he knew this wasn't just about him anymore. Major Elijah Ward didn't step away from the counter. He stood tall, broad shoulders square beneath the weight of his uniform, unmoving like a stone in the rising current of murmurs gathering behind him. "Ms. Monroe," Elijah said calmly, his voice cutting clean to the noise, "I will not leave this counter without a written explanation. If this is a security matter, then I request someone with actual authority to speak to me directly." Kelly glanced around, visibly flustered, as if praying someone might materialize and pull her from the tightening snare of the moment. I'll call a supervisor," she stammered, then reached for her radio and sent out a call. Elijah took half a step back, not as a retreat, but simply to clear the path for passengers now slowly gathering behind him. He could feel the eyes on him, some curious, some empathetic, others already simmering with a quiet outrage on his behalf. An older woman in a denim jacket leaned toward her husband and whispered, "A soldier? Denied boarding? In full uniform?" A young man in a hoodie stepped out of line, phone already recording. He spoke in a low but serious tone. "This is Phoenix Liberty Airport. A major is being denied boarding while escorting a fallen comrade." What is going on here? The tension spread like oil across water. And still, Elijah kept his expression steady. Years in the military had taught him not to react with emotion, especially when the provocation was so plain. He had seen war zones, carried brothers off the battlefield, and walked them home in silence. But what he could never get used to was how this country sometimes forgot who it asked to serve. Then came a voice from behind. "Colonel, what's going on here, sir?" Elijah turned. A man in his 60s, wearing a weathered cap that read Vietnam Vet, stood watching him with piercing eyes. "Just a little policy," Elijah said quietly, the sadness leaking through. The veteran frowned. "I've been searched, overlooked, but I've never been denied while bringing a brother home." Elijah nodded slightly. "I don't want to make a scene. I just want the basic respect due to someone who gave everything." Just then, another airline employee emerged from a frosted glass door. He wore a tie, a tight expression, and a name badge that read, Thomas Riedman, Supervisor. Thomas stepped forward, his smile strained with effort. "We sincerely apologize for the inconvenience, sir. Would you mind stepping aside so we can discuss this privately?" Elijah shook his head. "No, I want this conversation to happen right here, where everyone can witness it, because this isn't just personal anymore." Thomas froze for a moment. Phones were raised. Eyes were locked on him. And Elijah knew he was no longer standing alone. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice called from the crowd behind him, a calm, steady tone that cut through the tension. "I'm retired Sergeant Frank Delaney, served in Vietnam. And I'm here today not to stir chaos, but to ask one simple question. Why is a soldier in uniform escorting a fallen comrade home, being denied boarding without a single decent explanation?" The air in the terminal turned still. A few people clapped softly. Others raised their phones higher. Streams of live video flowed from Gate B7, out to social media, to veterans groups, to people far beyond this place who could no longer look away. Elijah remained silent. He didn't need to speak anymore, because others were now speaking for him. A young woman, barely in her 20s, held her phone steady as she live-streamed. "We're here at Phoenix Liberty Airport, and this is Major Elijah Ward. He's being denied boarding while on duty, escorting the remains of a fallen soldier. If you're watching this, share it. Don't let it disappear into silence." Within minutes, her stream had hundreds of live viewers. A verified Twitter account reposted the video with the caption, "This is how we treat those who serve our country? Unacceptable." Elijah could feel the shift in energy, not coming from him, but from the people gathering beside him. They were civilians, parents, students, workers, not wearing rank, not needing authority, only their conscience. A woman in a flight attendant's uniform stepped forward from a nearby counter. "I'm not supposed to interfere, but..." She paused, eyes on Elijah. "If that were my father, I wouldn't accept this either. I'm so sorry for what's happening." Thomas Riedman returned, visibly more tense. The corporate smile was gone. "We're coordinating with the security department. Please remain calm." Instantly, Frank Delaney replied, "We are calm, Mr. Riedman, but we are no longer silent." In a quiet corner of the airport, a local news reporter who happened to be nearby flipped on his camera. The official news lens had now been activated, and within seconds, Rick's phone buzzed with a flood of messages. The story's going viral. National networks are requesting comment. VP of Communications says hold all decisions until further notice. Thomas stepped back. Elijah remained standing tall. Not angry, not accusatory, just the unwavering presence of a man who had grown used to being judged, but never once bowed because of it. A boy, maybe 12, tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Mom, I want to salute him." The mother knelt and nodded. "Of course. Just remember to speak clearly." The boy stepped forward, stood in front of Elijah, and raised his hand in a formal military salute. "Thank you for your service, Colonel, sir." Elijah returned the salute with a gentle nod. In that moment, every gaze turned toward him was no longer one of curiosity. It was reverence, the kind of respect that doesn't come from wearing a uniform, but from a presence so dignified it could silence a crowd. Within just 30 minutes, Video footage of Colonel Elijah Ward being denied boarding while escorting the remains of fallen soldier Marcus Bell had spread across every major social media platform. On Twitter, the hashtags #LetHimFly and #HonorOurSoldiers shot into the top 3 nationwide trends. The official account of Veterans United Coalition posted, "There's no excuse, zero reason, for a military officer on sacred duty to be humiliated like this. We demand a formal explanation from Ether Sky Airlines." Moments later, retired Captain Malik Brooks, a well-known veteran with over 1.2 million followers, shared the post, adding, "I've seen a lot in my years, but never have I witnessed a colonel who's dedicated his life to this nation treated like a criminal in an airport just because of his skin and his uniform. Silence is complicity." On Facebook, the video had already been shared tens of thousands of times. Military news sites and Gold Star family groups rallied behind the story. One comment from a grieving mother who had lost her son in Afghanistan left thousands in tears. "If my son had come home in a flag-draped casket, I pray someone like Colonel Ward would be there to bring him. Denying him isn't just a personal insult. It's an offense to all of us." Ether Sky Airlines began to feel the pressure. Internal networks were in chaos. Their media relations office was flooded with calls from CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, even the military channel. But they still hadn't issued a statement because their designated spokesperson was still stuck outside the terminal. And the whole country was watching. At Phoenix Liberty International Airport, the crowd didn't fade. It grew. Locals began arriving, some carrying American flags, others holding handmade signs that read, "Respect our veterans," and "Elijah Ward speaks for us." A young woman, senior journalism student, was live on Instagram, mic in hand, interviewing passengers on site. "He doesn't say much," she whispered into the mic, "but the look in his eyes has silenced this entire airport." And then, the very thing Ether Sky had feared most happened. A headline appeared on the front page of the New York Times Online. Only 7 words long. The soldier returned home but couldn't fly. Back at the terminal, Elijah was still standing, still waiting, for an official response from Ether Sky Airlines. That's when the glass door behind the ticket counter slid open. A man in a sharp navy blue suit stepped out, posture polished but face tight with strain. The nameplate on his chest read, Douglas Whitmore, Regional Executive Director, Ether Sky Airlines. Beside him were the airport manager and 2 public relations officers, all attempting to force reassuring smiles, though their eyes darted nervously between the swarm of cameras, phones streaming live, and Elijah Ward, the upright, unmoved figure who hadn't once let his shoulders slump. "Colonel Ward," Douglas began, his voice urgent but hollow, "on behalf of Ether Sky, I want to extend our sincerest apologies. Clearly, there was an unfortunate misunderstanding. We deeply regret what happened." Elijah didn't reply. He simply looked Douglas in the eye, not with rage, not with bitterness, but with a stillness that demanded an answer no press statement could script. "We're in the process of rebooking your flight," Douglas continued quickly, "and of course, we'll be upgrading you to first class, offering full concierge services and a goodwill compensation package as a token of our apology." Elijah slowly lowered his hand from his cap. His voice was deep, steady, and unwavering. "Mr. Whitmore, I don't need first class. I don't need concierge service. I need respect." Something that should have been shown the moment I walked up to your counter with military documents in hand and a flag-draped coffin waiting on the tarmac. A wave of silence swept through the crowd. "I want to know," Elijah continued, "if I weren't in uniform, if I hadn't been filmed, if I were just a regular black man with a ticket in my hand, turned away, what would have happened then?" Douglas Whitmore froze. There was no prepared response to that question in his crisis management playbook. How many others have been treated this way without anyone knowing? Elijah paused. His voice never rose, but every word landed like iron. "I don't need your promises, Mr. Whitmore. I need you to face reality." A woman in the crowd began to cry. The older veteran, Frank, nodded slowly, gripping the brim of his hat with quiet reverence. Douglas swallowed hard, nodding in a mechanical, almost useless motion. We will review our entire protocol, he muttered. But no one was listening to him anymore. Every eye was locked on Elijah Ward, because in that moment, they weren't just looking at an officer. They were looking at a leader. Less than 5 minutes after the tense exchange, the echo of firm boots clicked across the marble floor of the terminal. The crowd instinctively parted as a tall figure in full military dress strode forward, flanked by 2 uniformed aides. The silver stars on his shoulders shimmered. Lieutenant General Raymond Beckett. Elijah recognized him instantly, a direct superior at the Department of Defense, known throughout the armed forces for his no-nonsense leadership and fierce protection of every soldier under his command. Raymond didn't glance around, didn't acknowledge the cameras. He walked straight to Elijah and offered a sharp, wordless nod. "Colonel Ward." "General," Elijah replied, offering a slight, automatic tilt of respect. "I've been fully briefed on the situation," Raymond said, voice steady, calm, but carrying enough weight to still the entire terminal. "What happened here is unacceptable. No service member, especially one escorting a fallen brother in arms, should ever be humiliated like this on home soil." Douglas Whitmore, still lingering nearby, began inching forward with a tight, corporate smile, but Raymond raised a hand to stop him cold. "You don't need to explain anything to me, Mr. Whitmore," he said without even turning. "This matter is now above your jurisdiction." Whitmore froze in place, his face blanched, while dozens of phones live-streamed his retreat. Raymond turned back to Elijah. "We've dispatched a military aircraft from Lackland Air Force Base. Wheels up in 40 minutes. An honor guard is already in place at the West Gate to receive Private Marcus Bell." The crowd gasped in soft amazement. An older woman in a striped sweater clutched the hand of the person beside her, whispering, "They actually sent a military plane." Elijah stood composed, but something in his eyes shifted. Not relief, not triumph, but something quieter, deeper. Peace. Because now this mission, this sacred duty, was finally in the hands of those who understood what it truly meant. "I'll accompany Colonel Ward to the base," General Beckett said, turning toward the reporters, "and I will personally report this incident to the Secretary of Defense." No one dared to interrupt. Raymond looked back at Elijah. "We're not just bringing a soldier home. Elijah, we're affirming that honor is not negotiable." Elijah nodded. "And that respect is not a privilege. It's simply what's right." The 2 men, 2 generations of officers, walked side by side out of the chaos. Behind them, the applause rose. Not wild, not frenzied, just the kind of applause that comes from people who know they've just witnessed something profound. Within 3 hours of Lieutenant General Raymond Beckett's exit from Phoenix Liberty Airport with Colonel Elijah Ward, the video of the confrontation at the Ether Sky check-in counter had surpassed 4 million views on Twitter. Hashtags #LetHimFly and #HonorOurFallen surged to the top of national trends. Primetime news on CNN, MSNBC, and Fox replayed the footage of Elijah, dressed in full uniform, being denied boarding while escorting a fallen soldier's remains. Reporters raced to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, to reach the family of Private Marcus Bell, and that's when the emotional firestorm truly ignited. Marcus's mother, Lorraine Bell, appeared on national television, her voice trembling. "I lost my son on the battlefield, but what hurt even more was knowing that the country he died for couldn't guarantee the man bringing him home a seat on a plane." Her words slashed through the already fractured image of Ether Sky like a blade. Within 24 hours, 17 veteran organizations and military advocacy groups released a joint statement demanding an independent investigation into the airline's actions, citing racial and positional discrimination. On the NASDAQ, Ether Sky's stock plunged 9.3% by mid-morning. The board of directors called an emergency session, issuing a carefully worded public apology. But social media wasn't having it. An apology? After humiliating a colonel and a fallen hero? Don't apologize, take responsibility. From a comment under the username @JusticeForJonas, which gained over 2.1 million likes. In Chicago, where Ether Sky's corporate headquarters were based, a group of veterans in uniform gathered outside with signs that read, We don't need upgrades. We need honor. Then came the breaking point. The next morning, during the highly anticipated Sunday Prime NFL broadcast on NBC, Ether Sky tried to air a new commercial honoring American soldiers. But within minutes, the station was flooded with hundreds of thousands of angry comments, tweets, and emails. Viewers called it a public display of hypocrisy. The hashtag boycott Ether Sky exploded across platforms. NBC quickly issued a statement saying they would suspend all Ether Sky-related advertising until further notice and pending official investigation. At the same time, Senator Kristen Ballard, a Navy veteran and one of the most respected voices in the military community, issued a formal inquiry to the Department of Transportation questioning airport security policies, particularly when they involve active-duty military personnel. No service member in uniform on official duty should ever have to explain why they deserve respect. While legislative bodies began to stir, Elijah Ward remained silent. No press statements, no social media posts. But his silence was a statement. He didn't need to justify anything. His calm, his duty, and his unwavering presence had already shown the entire country what was right. That same evening, a seasoned war correspondent posted on her personal account, "Some battles don't happen on the front lines. They happen right here, in the places that should be the safest for our soldiers." And this time, the soldier won by standing his ground. The very next day, as the Phoenix Liberty International incident dominated national headlines, the National Military Protection Agency, NMPA, formally filed a federal lawsuit against Ether Sky Airlines, citing systemic discrimination and violations of military rights under the USERRA Act. Within 24 hours, the three largest veteran organizations in the country declared their intent to join the lawsuit as co-plaintiffs. At Ether Sky headquarters, once pristine glass walls now swarmed with media crews. Emergency calls between legal, PR, and executive teams were nonstop. Internally, tension reached a boiling point. 8 employees directly involved in the incident, including a shift supervisor, check-in agents, and a regional manager, were immediately suspended as part of an urgent internal investigation. But the real storm hit when Douglas Whitmore, CEO of Ether Sky Airlines, made his first public appearance since the incident, inside a closed conference hall at the Hyatt Regency. With national television cameras trained on him, Douglas wore a Navy suit, clutching a typed statement with both hands. "On behalf of Ether Sky Airlines," he began, voice steady but rehearsed, "I offer our deepest apologies to Colonel Elijah Ward, to the family of Private Marcus Bell, and to the entire military community. What happened at the airport was unacceptable, and we take full responsibility." But the atmosphere in the room didn't soften. A reporter from The Atlantic spoke up directly. "Are you aware that over the past 6 years, at least 17 formal complaints involving disrespect toward uniformed service members were filed and ignored by Ether Sky?" Douglas faltered. I'm currently ordering a full internal review to verify those reports." But social media wasn't waiting for verification. The hashtag Justice for Elijah still topped national trends. A new viral video was making the rounds. Footage of Lorraine Bell, the mother of Private Marcus, standing silently as her son's flag-draped casket was received in a full military honor ceremony. "Elijah didn't just escort my son home," she said tearfully in the clip. "He upheld a sacred oath. And I still can't believe this country allowed him to be treated that way." The public wasn't satisfied with apologies. They demanded more than words. They wanted change. They wanted action. And most of all, they wanted justice. That same day, Senator Kristen Ballard's office announced that a new bill, tentatively titled the Elijah Ward Act, was in the works. The legislation aimed to strengthen protections for service members at commercial airports across the country. The legal storm was just beginning. And this time, it wasn't just going to sweep away a few employees. It had the potential to topple an entire airline empire that once believed it was too big to fall. Yet far from the noise in Chicago, at a small civilian airport in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Colonel Elijah Ward quietly stepped off the metal stairs of the military aircraft. No cameras, no media frenzy, only the morning wind, soft and solemn, and an honor guard waiting in full ceremonial form. The flag-draped casket, was carried down in silence. Elijah followed behind, each step firm, though his eyes were red and tired. Marcus Bell had once been under his command, trained by Elijah during his earliest days at Fort Benning. A good kid, a patriot, killed in a humanitarian mission in East Africa. Elijah no longer cared about flights or viral clips or online headlines. This was the only part that mattered now, the final chapter of a promise. Standing at the edge of the tarmac was Lorraine Bell, Marcus's mother. She wasn't crying like she had in the video that went viral. She stood tall, her hands folded gently over her heart, waiting. Elijah approached, removed his cap, and bowed his head with reverent silence. "Your son is home, ma'am," he said, voice low and unwavering. Lorraine didn't answer right away. She stepped forward and laid a trembling hand on his shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered, "not for bringing him home, but for keeping your promise." The reception ceremony was brief, 30 minutes at most. Dignified, but without spectacle. A military escort transported Marcus to the family's cemetery, just 7 miles away. Elijah didn't have to stay for the burial, but he did. He stood at the graveside until the final handful of earth was placed above the casket. Not out of duty, not for cameras. Only when everyone had left did he return to his hotel. No public remarks, no interviews. Inside the simple room, Elijah removed his uniform, laid it carefully over the arm of a chair, and sat by the window. Outside, the Iowa prairie stretched toward the horizon, quiet and open. He didn't need a stage. He didn't need a hashtag. He didn't need applause. The only thing he needed was a feeling of having fulfilled a sacred duty. From his chest pocket, Elijah pulled out a letter one Marcus had sent from the field. The handwriting was messy but heartfelt. "If anything happens to me, I want to be brought home by someone I trust. Someone who understands what that means." Elijah read the line again, then once more. His hand tightened slightly around the paper. Outside, the sun was setting, casting a gentle amber light across the rooftops of Cedar Rapids. No crowds, no chants, just peace. And for Elijah Ward, that light was real. The quiet, golden light that only comes after a vow has been kept. No medals, no grand ceremonies, just respect, and the quiet of a soldier when his final duty is done. Hundreds of miles away, the news still echoed across television screens. The story of a black colonel denied boarding a commercial flight, while escorting a fallen soldier, was no longer just a headline. It had become something deeper, a powerful reminder of a truth that still simmers beneath the surface of America. Respect is not a reward. It is a basic right. On social media, the video taken by a young passenger at the Ether Sky terminal had surpassed 20 million views. The hashtag Let Him Fly spread far beyond veterans and journalists. It was shared by students, single mothers, factory workers, people who had once stayed silent in the face of injustice. But this time, they didn't. A professor at Howard University wrote, "This wasn't an uprising. It was an awakening. When the people say enough, no system can pretend not to hear." The following week, the Department of Transportation announced a formal federal investigation into discriminatory policies within the airline industry. The CEO of Ether Sky officially stepped down, and at a community-led memorial, a group of high school students from Tempe, Arizona, stood on stage holding a sign that read, "Respect doesn't require rank. It requires humanity." As for Elijah Ward, he returned to base and resumed his duties. He didn't need titles. He didn't demand an apology, because he understood something most people forget. Real change doesn't come from outrage. It comes from resolve. And what gave him the deepest sense of peace? It wasn't seeing his name in the headlines. It was knowing that an ordinary citizen had dared to stand up, raise a phone, and say one simple thing: "I won't let this pass in silence." Because when one person speaks up, it's a beginning. But when many voices rise together, justice can no longer be ignored.